the program, which this evening, again, like I said, you'll be dealing with the family and childhood development. If you missed out, if you so happen to miss out on last week's program, I think you can play catch up at this point still, and still be able to have a full grasp of what you might have missed, and everything like that. So it's time for us to bring to you this evening's program, the Full and Abundant Life Radio program, hosted by Dr. Claudius Davis. Remember to be a part of the program. The number to call is 457-9997. Once again, 457-9997. Call us directly, send us a WhatsApp message, or place a WhatsApp call to be a part of the Full and Abundant Life Radio program. So without further ado, hey, we're not going to waste any more time. Let me turn you over to Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis, good night and welcome. I love your shirt, man.
Okay, thank you. And just so you know, I was enjoying your music. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
I was listening from actually 6 o'clock, so truly enjoy the rock. So, but I was tempted to sign in a little early, but then I realized that maybe it wasn't the right thing to do. So I had some discipline, put it that way. But we certainly want to welcome all of you tonight for another of the series in the family and childhood development. And of course, this is part two. And I'm still kind of laying the foundation for this. So there'll be several other lessons. And I think I got a text, someone kind of mentioned that when I was asked about to identify myself, that it seemed like I was uncertain about that, but I'm never really uncertain about who I am. But I think the person was emphasizing more of my religious affiliation, and I thought I did a good job in terms of that. But basically, I believe in the Holy Scriptures, and I try to model along that line in terms of truly understanding the New Testament scriptures, or not just the New Testament, but the entire 66 books, and try to get a better sense of what God wants us to know. But tonight, I want to begin this discussion about childhood development and the family. And I want to begin with a passage in Judges chapter 13 and verse 8. And this is where, the angel came to Samson's parents and said, look, you're going to have a child. And so after the wife shared that with the husband Manoah, Manoah made a request. And so I want to read that to you tonight because I think it's important for us to understand this. Then Manoah entreated the Lord and said, Lord, please let the man of God whom you've sent come to us again, that he may teach us what to do when the boy who is to be born. In other words, he said, look, yes, it is true. You said we're going to have a child, but send the angel again. I want him to come so he can teach us how we are to raise this child. And that's in verse 8. And then in verse 12, Manoah said, now when your words come to pass, what shall be the boy's manner of life and his vocation? In other words, this family wanted to know how they ought to raise this child. What should be the manner of his life? And I think as parents, I think that this is a critical question. I work where I work. I work in the correctional facility, of course, and sometimes I look at all the different names of some of these individuals, like Paul, Peter, and James, and Timothy, and I reflect on when that child, when that adult now was an infant, and how at the birth, how the parents were so happy and excited, and they picked a name and usually it's a Bible name. They picked that name at Timothy, and I'm thinking in terms of their aspiration for that infant, what they were thinking. I know this person's sitting and I'm thinking, okay, the name fits, but here we are in this sort of predicament, where the life didn't really turn out, I would think, the way that the parents had hoped. And many of you who are listening tonight can probably relate to that, in terms of the aspirations and the joy that you had at the birth of a child, whether it be your grandmother or an aunt or cousin or whatever. You understand that. And so I think the point here is that we have family have to begin to understand that that this is a tremendous gift from God, and so you ought to take this seriously. And the first step really is to go to God and ask Him for guidance, just like this Manoah, Samson's father. Of course, we know it didn't quite turn out the way that the parents had wanted things to turn out, but nonetheless, that they had gone to God and asked how they should raise this child. And so I wanted to say to us that prayer is critical in terms of when you start talking about marriage, when you start talking about starting a family, you have to start that with the awareness that you do need this divine partnership. This is a partnership. It's not just you and your spouse, but also you have to include that divine partnership. And that's critical, I think, in terms of if you're going to be able to raise a child, especially in this environment. So I want to talk to us a little bit today about, or to challenge you in terms of building resiliency. And how do we do this? How do we build resiliency? What does that mean for us? How do you define that? How do you get around to actually doing the whole idea of constructing this, where you can begin to look at your family? And some of the tough question I think that we have to ask ourselves is about what are some of the protective factors, within this family? What are some of the things that we need to safeguard against in terms of raising this child, in terms of nurturing this child, so that this child can move from an infant to become a healthy adult and be able to perform the way that you intend for him and the way that God has designed him to be. So I think that, but we have to understand though that when I talk about family here, I am also talking about not just the nuclear family, but I'm also talking about the spiritual family. I think that you can't really separate them out. I think they go together. And so we have to begin to understand that it is God, within this community. And I think whether it be in the nuclear family, or whether it is in the local church, we have to begin to see the connection, that they overlap together. You can't really separate. And I think we kind of, so from a social psychological standpoint, even economically, I think we separate them out. We see church and we see the family. And of course, politically, I think we have political ideas about don't mix the two. You got to keep them separated. And we see this even in our educational system, that certain interest group goes to great length to ensure that you keep these things apart, so that in our educational system, you're not allowed to have prayer, in a classroom, because that somehow is offensive to certain people, and therefore let's keep the classroom, let's make it more academic and social. We can do all of those things, but you can't really involve in terms of having a spiritual aspect to it. In other words, students are not allowed to pray. Teachers can't do this. You can't read a verse. You can't do those things. And I'm saying that that's a horrible mistake, I think, that we're making in terms of, and of course, I think politics and religion are two. It's the things you don't talk about. When people come together, there's this silent thing, or this hidden thing. We don't talk about politics, and we don't talk about religion, because if you start talking about politics, we get into trouble. If you start talking about religion, we get into. So let's just stay clear of all of that. And I'm saying that that's a horrible mistake that we're making, because I believe that politics and religion are really driving our culture. It's driving who we are. It is shaping how we define ourselves, how we see ourselves. It is driving the policies that are there. It's driving our homes, our marriages, how we define ourselves. So all of that, I think, is very important. But those are the things that we want to keep apart. But tonight, when we talk about the family, and when we talk about building resiliency in children, we're really talking about how we are going to put God within the family and keep God within the religious environment, the spiritual environment, and how these two things overlap. You can't really separate them out. Because I believe that the family, the home, and usually I think some people may be offended because I'm using the term nuclear family. And I'm doing that deliberately because I think the way that God set up the system is that every family within a home, you'll have a father and you'll have a mother. And God himself, in the very beginning, in the first 3 chapters of Genesis, kind of outlined the role of the father and the role of the mother. And so I think that pattern is something that we should still be fighting for. I think that's a pattern we should try to be endeavoring to sort of, restore back that kind of a pattern. I think once we do that, I think we're going to see a lot of changes within our family system. And I think our children will be much better off once that situation begin to take place. And so I think that the place, because the home and the local congregation are being driven by the power of God. I think, and that's important for us to understand. So, but I think today, I think we have somehow isolated the power of God to Sunday morning or whenever, maybe in some other group, it's on Saturday. We isolate the power of God to that 1 hour, 2 hour experience that you have in a building at a particular day of the week. And so we say the power of God is there. But I want to say to you that is a fallacy. That fallacy in the sense that the power of God really is in the home. That's where it really starts. And so once you go to the local spiritual community, you bring with you God, because God is in residency in the individual. You don't just put God off and then you put him on. I think some people kind of equate, on Sunday morning you get dressed, you put your clothes on, fix your hair, put your makeup on, and then you go meet God at the building, and then when you come home, you wash everything off, and then you put new stuff on, and you begin to do something because God is no longer there. You leave God behind. I think that's a horrible mistake and I think that might be part of the problems that we're seeing in our society, whether it be mental health issues, addiction issues, social issues, whatever those problems are. I think it might be because we have somehow locked God in this kind of a box, in this area. And so he's not allowed in our homes. But I believe that the power of God must be experienced in our homes. And if that's not happening, then we certainly are going to have a severe issue. And so I just wanted to see, somehow I can't get online with this. So I'm hoping that if any of you have already tuned in on, say, the Facebook page, if you send a text so that it'll trigger something on my phone, and then I'll be able to see that as well. Because I'm not actually seeing anything at this point in terms of on the Facebook page for those of you who might be interacting. So you may have to send me a message of some kind if you're already signed in, so that I can actually begin to monitor and see if you have any questions or comments. So maybe I'll have Kamal to go to your Facebook page and send me a text or something like that, so that I could see that. It will trigger some
Interestingly enough, Doc, on your Facebook, people have already been commenting.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. I'm not seeing it here. So that's my problem. I don't know why that
That's
is.
right. So what would you probably
Oh,
um
somebody just sent a text, so I just got it, and
oh,
I want to
wonderful.
thank the person. I want to thank the person. So now, now it just obviously popped up. So yeah, let me just try to see what. Good night. Okay, Stephen said good night, and Daph said good night. Okay, so it's there. So I will keep monitoring some of those, and come on, if you do see anything that I'm not missing that I need to mention, you can just bring it to my attention. Okay. So yes, so and you will monitor that as well. But anyway, so I'm saying to us that if you want to have, when we talk about, protective factors within the God occupied family, what would that look like? And I think you have to begin to understand who God is, the Godhead, and that is power. And it's power in terms of shaping our personalities, shaping us in terms of helping us to be, as a mother, to be more forgiving, to be more loving, to be more kind, to be more gentle. And that kind of a character, those traits that is coming from the presence of God, have an impact in how we respond to our children. And so, in my profession, I mean, some of the horrible things that I see, it's just amazing what people do in terms of what children have to go through. And I categorize this as many children are going through what I describe as near death experience. These are children who are witnessing, one spouse are being beaten to the point where killed in some instances, wind up in the hospital, blood all over the wall in the house, and the excessive screaming. And you're talking about a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old who are completely hopeless and helpless, who are in a situation like that. And then you wonder how are these adults, how are these children, once they move into early adolescent, what they look like, their personality, their character, as they move into adult, what does that look like? And I think that's why we are building more prisons. That is why we are allocating more money to mental health, because there's a lot of issues that are happening in terms of people's lives that are broken. And what I want to say to us tonight, that brokenness starts very early within our home, because our home ought to be a place of divine power, because God should be in every home. And when I say in every home, I'm not talking about having some plaque up, or having a cross somewhere, or having little quotations on the walls. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where God is in residency in the person, where through your faith, you now have a practical, realistic experience of the divine power at home. And so you can be able, you're able now to stem the tides, because life is going to squeeze you in. There are times as a mother or as a father, you're going to feel boxed in, whether it be the trigger might be financial issues, or relational issues, or mental health issues, or medical issues, or financial issues. So there are going to be times when things are going to be pressing on you, and how you react, how you control yourself, whether you're going to be yelling and screaming and becoming ugly and nasty, or whether or not you're going to be able to maintain a spirit of gentleness irrespective of the storm that you're going through. And so I'm saying to us that part of this home that we're talking about is a place where the power of God is being operationalized, where it becomes a present reality, that people are not sitting there pulling their hair out because they don't know how they're going to pay the mortgage. They don't know how they're going to do this. They don't know what's going to happen. And we have to begin to understand that when God is in the midst, when he is become a reality and a partnership, life becomes much easier. It's not that you're going to get wealthy, but what it is, whatever life is throwing at you, you're going to have enough power and enough resources to be able to ride it out. And that's part of, because there are going to be storms in your life. And but you're able to ride those storms out because of that power that is in residence. And I'm saying to us that if Christianity means anything, if the death of Christ have any meaning, it has to apply to you as a parent, as a dad, in your home, as you're raising your children. Because there's no sense in going down the church building and start shaking your hips and singing and yelling and all of that stuff that people do. Because you see, God is at home. And what you need to do is to demonstrate the power of God in your parenting skill. When you don't have enough money, you don't have enough whatever it is, to be able to demonstrate to your children, despite our shortage, despite all the stuff that is happening, we're still okay. You don't have to panic. We're going to be here for you. We're not going to get a divorce. We love each other, and we're going to get through this together because God is with us. And that's what I'm trying to say to us. We have to begin to understand that the power of God, that must become a reality in all of your experiences. But not only do you need to have, well, of course, I think I imply that because the presence of God, you see, you have to begin to experience the presence of God in your life. And sometimes the only time we sometimes experience the presence of God is when the priests come to visit, with the collar. Okay. So we say we're in the presence of God, or the Pope comes to town, or the preacher happens to visit us. God is here now. No, I'm saying to you that God is with you, and if he isn't, you need to do whatever you need to do so that you make that a reality, a practical reality, because that's why Christ died. Christ died so you can be a better mother and a better father, so that your home life, where your children are being raised and being socialized at home, they can experience the fullness of the grace of God, the fullness of God's forgiveness, the fullness of his love. And that must be modeled in our everyday relationship. And of course, all of that there's a purpose in all of this. And that's why I'm trying to say that, you have to be able to have, because a lot of parents I see sometimes, they have no clue as to where they're going. They have no goal, no plan. It's just they're just drifting along, And of course, I've seen situations where one parent may just sit at home every day and watch TV and do absolutely nothing, while the other person go out. And in some cases, it's the reverse. It's the mother who actually has to go out and work, and she may be a nurse working all these odd hours, and the so-called husband or the so-called male person is home all day watching TV, doing nothing. And then she has to come home and she has to do the laundry, she has to cook, and she has to do everything so he can have something to eat. I actually had a case once where the wife will actually take her break and actually go home to make him lunch while he's at home. It's just, I'm saying that this is not the divine plan. This is not the family that God designed. This is a family that these children that are being socialized in these families are going to have severe problems. And you're going to see them in mental health situations, clinics, and so on, or you're going to see them in prison, or you're going to see them on the streets, and all kinds of things, because these children, that kind of a model damages their personality, who they are. And so we have to begin to understand that within each home, within each family, there ought to be a surplus of experience in terms of the power of God, the presence of God, and the purpose of God, and of course the purification of God. Because God, in order for God to be there, he's holy. And so we have to begin to be moving towards holiness as a perfection. That's what I think 2 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 1 says, that we are to be perfecting holiness. I'm not saying that mom is going to be perfect. I'm not saying that dad is going to be perfect. It's surely not. I mean, you rub her around. She may just spew some adjectives out there. That is not right. Quite. If she's really stressed out and frustrated, it is possible that that will happen. But the point, I heard someone said the other day. I was watching a program, and the person said, he says he does two things. He actually dream in his native language, and he also curse in his native language. And I'm like, well, you're a preacher. What are you gospel? What are you talking about? They say, yeah, that's your native language. And if you're going to curse, you're going to curse in your native language. And if you're going to dream, you're going to dream. And the point that I'm making is that we all make mistakes, that we are all vulnerable. We're not perfect, but we certainly can create an environment in our homes where our children can learn how to love and how to respect themselves, how to be responsible adults, because we have modeled it to them. And sometimes I think that, and I think many of us are guilty of this, we kind of see, Christianity more in terms of an educational journey, an academic journey. We give a lot of information. And what I'm saying to us, children are not attracted to the information. What they're attracted to is the relationships that we forge. That's what they remember. They remember, children, they make the final decision as to what they're going to internalize. Now, you want them to internalize a lot of stuff, but the stuff that they internalize are the stuff that they like. And that's where, sometimes you will see, in a home where you have domestic violence, that the boy may, as soon as he become an adult, he start beating his girlfriend. Even though the father might say, never do this, never put your hand on a woman, okay? But what the boy decide to file in his head is not what the dad says, never do this, is what the dad was actually doing, and he liked that. Follow? So we have to begin to understand this journey is not an educational journey. And some of you may do some pushback on this. And certainly you can, because the Bible says you should know the truth, and the truth will set you free. But what if I were to say to you, that Jesus said that I am the truth? And in that context, he's talking about a relationship with me. You must have a relationship with me. And so what I'm saying to us is not so much about the education that we're giving our children. We tell our children, don't do this, don't do this. And as soon as you turn your back, what happened? The child's going to do exactly the opposite of that, because the child will always do the things that they like, and that's what they're going to store in their memory. So if you are beating your spouse, but then you try to tell your son, never put your hand on a woman, the child may choose to internalize the actual moment that you are beating, and he may gravitate towards that and would like to do that, and actually would practice that same thing, even though intellectually you say don't do this. So we have to begin to understand here that there is a purification process. And I'm looking at this from the standpoint, the purification process is actually the modeling of right behavior to our children. You can teach them all you want. You can get them to memorize the 10 Commandments. You can get them to memorize all these passages. But ultimately, what the children are going to choose are the things that they like and the things that they enjoy. And they will edit. Children will edit. And when they edit, they're going to only keep the things that they want, that they like, of interest to them. For example, you will tell a kid, don't smoke, but you're smoking. And so that's education. Don't do this, right? But guess what? The first time you're not there, the kid is going to try it because he wants to do that, because you're doing it. And so we have to understand this whole idea of the transformation of life, helping our children to develop healthy personalities, to develop healthy characters. It's not so much about what we tell them not to do as it is modeling repetitively before them a particular lifestyle that ultimately that they can become attracted to. And once they become attracted to that particular lifestyle, then they may then make it, file it, because ultimately they have to file that information. And we are nothing more than stored information. Your personality, your character is nothing more than the experiences that you like, that you have stored within you. And that's who you're going to be. So if you feed your children on caustic, cursing and the four-letter word, you're doing it every day in your home, chances are your children are going to use it. And and guess here's the interesting thing: the first time they use it, you're probably going to spank them or hit them or knock them out or cuff them, bust them, whatever, right? But you use it every day. And the moment you hit the child because he uses the same language, the child is going to say, that's what an adult does. And I want to be an adult. And then they're going to develop a thirst for becoming an adult. And they're going to define being an adult is the ability to curse and be able to use vulgarity and be able to do those things. And so even though you spank the child and you beat the child for cursing, the child may file that information as that is something that an adult do, and I want to be an adult. I want to have the freedom so that I can do whatever I want, and therefore the child may connect cursing with part of being an adult, and therefore that's already filed, and they will become that way. So what I'm saying to us is that purification process that must happening in our home has to be us modeling to our children the lifestyle that we want for them to have when they grow up. And we have to do it repetitively so that it becomes a habit. And once it moves from you want it to move from the conscious level to the subconscious level, where your children will just do it automatically because it's become now a part of who they are. And that takes a lot of effort on the part of a parent, to be because sometimes you want to curse, right? Sometimes you want to curse, but you realize, look, I my job is to be able to raise these children a certain way, and so I'm willing to, wait, take a drive with a husband, go to the park somewhere, and knock his head off. You can do that too, but in your home though, you are conscious of the fact that you're trying to help these youngsters to become responsible adults. And in order to do that, we have to be very careful. So God is realized and manifested in our daily lives. When people see us, they see God living in us. And Linda, thank you for that observation, that statement. And that's basically what I'm trying to say to us. We have to back off this educational kinds of thing. And I think a lot of churches, are making that mistake because they feel by creating an academic community where you begin to somehow get people to memorize passages, somehow it makes them a better person. And I'm saying that that's not true. That is, as a matter of fact, in therapy, if you really want if you want to be successful as a therapist, you have to step away from this whole piece and begin to form relationship with your clients, form relationship. And as you begin to form the relationship, then you can begin to model the direction that you think that they want to, and they can become attractive to that direction that you're modeling. But that's what it is. But a lot of us believe that the way you fix people is to educate them, and that's why we have so many people, who go in and out of jail because we tell them it's wrong. We do all this wrong, but they still do it because there are certain things within their personality that is deeply embedded. And so we have to understand, we have to begin, Jesus talks about this. He talks about, what defile a man is not what's going into the man, but rather it's what, it's the process information. That's what Jesus would be saying. Look, it's when you process it, what's coming out is, that which shape your personality. That's not what's going in. So the academic journey is a lot of information that you're giving people, but what's coming out is the process information. And people are going to edit that information that you give to them. And they're going to take the one they like, the one that gives them joy, the one that gets them happy. And that's the thing that they're going to be filing in their system. Our children are no different. That's the way the children, one of the things that people seem to think that children, somehow they're immoral. And that's not true. Even young kids, they know right from wrong. And if one child do something, another child will say, no, no, that's not right, and run and tell mommy that, that, because children have that ability to be able to make decisions, judgment, some judgment. But sometimes our adult behavior overlay on these things, and children begin to tweak their own sense of value in order to accommodate what it truly means to be an adult. And sometimes the way we behave as an adult is absolutely horrible. So think about when we think about the family and creating an environment for our children, you have to think in terms of this divine power, think in terms of God's presence, think in terms of divine purpose, and think in terms of purification in the sense of modeling to your children the kind of character that you'd like for them to cultivate. And you have to help them in this cultivating process of doing this. And the way you help your children to cultivate these good habits, there has to be a pattern of repetitive habit, repetitive, doing it, not just telling them in an educational manner, but rather being able to monitor it again and again and repetitively in every aspect of your relationship. And as you begin to practice that, then the child begin to become attracted rather to some of those behavior. Not all of them now, not all of them, not all of them. But I think the majority of them, that children will become attracted, and then they will try to internalize those and make those behaviors there. So let me just cite two passages that I think that might be helpful in terms of this intergenerational, how this happens. And in 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 5, it says, "For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which first dwell in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am sure that it is in you as well." So let's talk about this. What is this faith that Paul is talking about? What is this thing that Paul was able to see in the grandmother and was able to see in the mother, and is thinking that Timothy somehow will copy this thing? We're talking about a way of thinking. Faith is a way of thinking. It's the substance of what you become, so that it becomes automatic. You know, a person is not a thief. They will not do this. There's an honesty about them that in terms of the persona, the aura, you can see it. And that's what Paul is talking about. This is something that becomes visible. But this faith that he's talking about is talking about a way of life, part of their personality, that there's an expectation to who this person is. It's almost a definition. Who defines you? And what Paul is simply saying, that this grandmother was able to create, she became this thing that was admired by others, and they knew that this was who she was. So it was, Paul is talking about her character and her personality. And he's saying, not only did I see it in a grandmother, but also I see it in her daughter as well. And sure, if you, Timothy, grew up with these two women, it is reasonable for me to think that you are going to have the same character, the same kind. I can count on you just like I can count on them, because it is part of who you are. And that's a very powerful statement, because what it's simply saying is that what you want is for your children to be like you. And I know that's scary, right? That's scary because some of you say, no, I don't want my son to be like my husband. Never. You know, I know, but you may be thinking that. But the reason you're thinking that is because over the years you've seen the character of your husband, and now you know that is something I do not want for my son. But the chances are your son has already copied that, because your son may have already copied that your son, your husband's behavior is what your son is gravitating, because he's an adult, and therefore he is looking forward to the day when he can be a man and be an adult, and therefore all the bad behaviors that you don't want your son to copy may well have already been copied, because remember, your son is witnessing the same things that you're witnessing, right? And so that's how important it is for us to understand the role of a father and the role of a mother, that how important it is, because you're raising children. And it's not just, sometimes we see our responsibility just as providing a roof over their head, be able to put food in their belly, and maybe pay for their college. And some families don't even do that. They pay for their college, and we kind of say this is what it is about. And I'm saying to us, it's not about those things. What's really important is to give your children the skill and the ability, so that their motivation, that they're motivated to better themselves, and so that they may even go further than you've gone, because you've helped them to begin to cherish who they are, and to begin to set goals for themselves, and be able to look down the road and say, this is where I'd like to be. And you help them to do that. And so they may choose to do all of those things. And like I said, they may even go further than you've gone. But you have to begin to help them to lay that foundation where they can begin to be disciplined, they have self-respect for themselves, begin to be honest, and begin to see themselves in a larger community, and prepare them to be able to live in that larger community as well. Let me just check. Okay. No, again, for those of you who are listening there in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you certainly can use the numbers to call us, or you certainly can send a text as well if you choose to do so. So that's the one. Another passage where Paul, referenced this young man, Timothy, and that is in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 15. Again, where Paul is again talking about the same young man, Timothy. He says, and that from childhood, you have known the sacred writings, which are able to give you wisdom that leads to salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. And in verse 16, it says, and all scripture is inspired by God, and is profitable. Look at this. Profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, or righteous behavior, or just behavior. If you want to be just, the scriptures can help you to do that. And then he says in verse 17, so that the man of God may be adequate, equipped for every good work. And I want you to think about what Paul is saying here in terms of what the Holy Scriptures is able to do. I mean, this is magnificent. It's interesting that sometimes we go to parenting skill classes, and we have people tell us how to be better wives, how to be better husbands, but I want to say something to you here, that Paul is simply saying here that the Holy Scriptures here can shape your marriage, can shape your life, can shape who you are, and you can be the best of the best. Best husband, best mother, best father, best everything, best wife, and everything. The Holy Scripture, it says, equipped for every, notice it says, every good work. And so the scriptures are able to do that. And sometimes it is discouraging sometimes where, even the minister or the pastor or the evangelist or will say, oh, you're having a marital problem, you need to go to a psychologist, you need to go see a social worker, you need to go see a psychiatrist, and you wonder, why are we paying you? Why are you in the pulpit? What are you need to resign. You need to give up, because I mean, you may think I'm funny when I say that, but what is your role? If you don't know, if you can't help a couple who's having marital problems, if you can't use the Holy Scriptures, use your own life to able to give them an alternative that can help them to fix this marriage, then I think you should resign. I think you should step off the pulpit. I think you should give it up because you're wasting time. Because you know why? Because I think we have come to the conclusion that being an evangelist or being a minister or being a bishop or whatever you want to call yourself, that is about performing for the audience. It's like a play, and you are the actor and you perform for them, and that's what we do. We perform, and I'm saying to you that level of performance may get people euphoric, intoxicated like cocaine would, but it's going to wear off. It doesn't work. But you have to begin to sit down with people and walk them through and have them tell you what they're going through, and then begin to have the listening skill so that you can, because people listen. I want to say this, and maybe one of these I don't listen on it. For every problem that a person come to you to fix, they already have the answer within themselves. We all have the problem, the solution to the problem that we're struggling with already in us. It's there. How do I know this? How do I know this? 1 John chapter 4 and verse 4 says, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. I know that everything, all of the resources, spiritual resources that God has to offer to you is already planted in you. So everything you need, I read a quote from a famous prime minister in England. Many years ago, he was a prime minister in England, and he made this statement. He says, look, I could share my wealth with another person, but he says, the greatest thing I can do for that person is to get them to see their own wealth. And I think sometimes as ministers, as counselors, as psychologists, I think we become so arrogant, so puffed up, that we think that we have the solution. And I'm saying to you tonight that every person have within them the power and the seed of success. And all we can do is to point the light and get them to see what's already there. And even as a therapist, I had to learn that the hard way, because I used to think I can fix people. And then I realized that my greatest job is to get people to see the strength and the power that's already in residency in them. Because think about this. I think most preachers and teachers in the church would say to people that Christ is already in them. Then if Christ is already in them, what problem they already have, you just have to get them to see that they can fix the problem that they have. And whether it be a marital problem, it might be one person is unforgiven. It may be one person is cheating. And maybe one person is just nasty. Maybe whatever it is, they already know what it is that they need to do to fix their problem. And sometimes therapy, in family therapy, is nothing more than people pointing finger and criticizing, projecting on each other. And then the preacher may then, or the counselor may just join with which one he likes. And then they shoot down the other person. And before that person left, he's probably already to the cemetery. But that's not what it is. Part of what we need to do is to be able to empower people to see that the strength already in them, the power is already in them. And so if we can get people to see that, to take ownership for what God has given to them, the resources that's already there. Then
We
if
have a caller.
No,
go,
what?
go ahead.
Yes, yeah, that's just take off it. Yes, Pastor Claudius.
Mhm.
Good night.
Okay, now you have my first name, huh? Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
No, I was just joking. Go
Yes,
ahead.
yes, go, yes, man. You was talking something about the marriage, and then the Bible is telling you that when a man married, he's supposed to clean to his wife, and once your wife alive, I husband alive, you can't marry again if all the mash up. But he has some people, even pastors, living so happily by having a second marriage and the spouse still alive. And they Christian too. I thought plenty of people Christian that doing it. So so me know where's the advice you offer these people by fooling themselves and think that they make it when God can be compromised with and God can be like be untruthful. So therefore I mean to say by act of forgiveness for your sins, but at the same time supposed to die in your sin. Supposed to die having a woman that you married a second time and your spouse still alive. What kind of risk a man could be running like that? Because hell is a real place. And being in the presence of God and the right side is a real place. So how come a Christian and we as human beings could be running this kind of risk until we shall be saved? Because I might be, and how could a man be saved? Because what happened? I a man, a long ago I used to pick up a mango and say, well, boy, that is nothing. But a mango have an owner, and she have an owner.
Yeah.
May
I comment? I want to comment. You want me to say to those people, but I want to talk to you. I want to say to you. I think you have to really step back and look at the scriptures carefully. First of all, you have to ask yourself, what is it that Jesus himself, he gave some recommendation himself. And what Jesus in his ministry, what he said was that if a person commits adultery, then you certainly can go ahead and get a divorce. Now, my personal view on this is this, that forgiveness takes precedence over everything. And so if one person commits an adultery, even though you may have the right to terminate, I'm saying if that person asks for forgiveness, then forgiveness takes precedence. You have to, because we all have to forgive each other as Christ has forgiven us. So at my threshold in any relationship is about forgiving each other. And once you can establish that, however, if the person who is guilty in this says, look, I don't need your forgiveness, I need to move on, I'm done. Jesus is simply saying that you can move on and remember.
So we're telling me that
that's Jesus. So yeah, I think I want to go with Jesus because he died for me. He died for our sins. So I think that he is the person that we should be looking to for guidance when it comes.
Yeah, but I want to get something clear. Yes. So what you're saying is that if you have a spouse and she do something, commit adultery, and you have to left her, then Jesus says, all right for you to marry somebody else or something like that.
Yes, you can move on. That's my view.
You could move on. Well, that is what, because
yes,
plenty of people preach that. Pastors and things preach that if you marry.
Here's the thing. Listen to me. Here's the thing. What we need to do is not what other people say. What we need to do is to read the scriptures for ourselves and then come away with a conclusion from what we have read. Because remember, we all must stand before God to give an account that we've done. So it doesn't matter what somebody else has said. And I'm saying to you tonight,
Yeah.
based upon the ministry of Jesus, based on how he handled that subject, he's saying that unless there is adultery involved in that relationship, that you cannot move on. That's what he says. Now, I just move it one step further and say that forgiveness takes precedence over everything. So if the spouse is the one who's committed the error, and that spouse says, "Look, I need forgiveness. I need to keep my marriage," I believe that the other person should treat that person like Christ would treat them, which is to usher forgiveness and move on with the marriage. So that's my.
Yes, but I understood that. But what I say,
forgiveness.
no, I can't really read as a one.
Yeah?
But what I really saying is, if you and the person separate, something separate all you, and then he person, he's not going to forgive her. She and he will not come back in your life because they already moved on with somebody else.
Mhm.
That's what we're talking about in a big sense.
And they have ended the relationship and start another
Yes.
relationship. So they've ended the relationship. So I'm saying the innocent person, what you're saying is that we should now punish the innocent person. Okay. I mean, that's how it's going to work out in your thing, saying the innocent person should now be punished. And I don't think the scripture supports that. I don't think there's a single verse where that supports that.
But I ain't saying that though.
Mhm.
I just asking if the innocent person should be, punished. But I know, I ain't gonna say that. But I just want to get something clear. Like in case I want to run my mouth on somebody.
What I'm saying to get clear, what I'm saying to you to get it clear, don't listen to these other preachers. Just go to the scriptures and ask yourself, how did Jesus handle this? Go through the passages by yourself and read the passages. Forget about all the other people. I think we get into trouble when we listen to other people. Just read the scriptures themselves. And once you read it, I guarantee you will come away with the right answer on that.
Well, I'm so glad that you explained this thing to you all, because I was going around accusing people, watching them like if they might not make it into heaven because of this.
That's why I wanted to talk to you and not talk to them. That's why I wanted to talk to you and not talk to them, because I believe that
they're hearing you now.
Listen, you can do a great service because there are families that are hurting. And you can become the ambassador, the vehicle of helping families to heal. Because remember, out of divorce, the children are the ones who are paying the ultimate price. Divorce is bad, should never be. And children pay the price in this. And so we've got to begin families, we've got to reduce divorce. Because you got to understand the victims of this. So we cannot
explain this thing. Yes, I so glad to explain this thing that put a lot of people heart at rest. At rest now, because I now feel good, because I have friends that have second marriage and thing, and getting the wife or the wife getting the husband in fornication, and this is not going back. And I help them think, well, you forgive what I say them. Some of them so think they're taking back one another and this kind of thing, and they go on with their life. And we used to
Jesus said, I want you to forgive others as I have forgiven you. So if you're too big that you can't forgive, then come on now. How can you be walking in the footsteps of Jesus? You have to forgive.
Yeah.
And so that's what love is. Remember, small problems happened. And if people learn to forgive and to love each other, we have to understand, we have to teach our children that there may be storms in our lives, but we have to rise above that. God will help us to walk through our problems, and our children can learn and develop the strength from our example. And getting divorce lawyers is not the way to go. The way to go is to fix the problem. And that's why I think a lot of our preachers to the lawyers instead of actually sitting with people and unfold for them the gospel message of repentance and reconciliation. And once people begin to understand that, the children need to be protected in this, and children need mom and dad, not step parents.
Yes.
So let me just say this before I move on. I want to say this before I move on, okay? The highest rate of incest and sexual abuse is in step families.
Yes.
You hear me? The highest rate of sexual abuse among girls are in step families.
Yes, yes, yes.
Understand that. And some of the worst neglect and abuse is in step families, where stepchildren are treated as second-class citizens within families.
Yes.
I'm saying
that's true.
Not the way to go. We need to practice forgiveness and love early. And if we practice that, I believe we can save our families and help our children to be strong, because they will have problems also in their own marriages. But they remember how mom and dad dealt with it, and they can use some of the same skills and strategies to strengthen their own families as they move.
One more thing before you go do.
Okay. What is going to kill you to go ahead? Go ahead.
Yeah. What kind of what motive a fella to deliver? What faith or patience a guy should deliver to refrain himself from interfering with your own family or something outrageous like that? To refrain from fornication and adultery. You have any idea what kind of faith? I know you don't trust God, but sometimes a fella figure, well, I might do this and get away and maybe continue doing that. Some fella may clean up, say, well, no happen. God ain't like that, so I ain't doing that.
Well,
you have any advice on that?
My brother and my friend, remember this. Jesus said, except ye be converted and become as a little child, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. God wants to kill you, and he wants to bury you, all of you. So what you're talking about are people who using the church as a social club. The church is a playground. The church is not a playground. People have to genuinely make the sacrifice, take up their cross, and follow. And like I said, that cross that you need to follow, you need to take up, might be that spouse that was unfaithful. That is your cross that you must carry. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm just saying that there's a cross that we must carry. And we have to shoulder that cross. And if it's a sexual problem, that is something you need to work on so that you can become faithful to your partner. God wants that. Don't go around and play like David, okay? We have to step up. You follow? Because we're in a new covenant. We have better sacrifice, better everything. And God, whatever problems you have, Christ can help you to overcome those weaknesses so that you can become a good father, a good husband, a good lover, a good everything. So, and that's why I want to
talk about that, Pastor. As you talk about that, you know,
we have to go with 3 minutes past. 3 minutes past. Okay, thank you so much for calling. Okay, thank you. But I want the audience to know that the caller is not off base, because we're talking about the family and how we raise our children. So he's on point here. And divorce is part of something that we want to talk about in terms of how it impacts children negatively. And we don't want to do that. So thank you so much, Kamal, and God bless. And I want to thank everybody who's on the link. I can't get to all of you tonight, but I want to thank all of you for tuning in. And we will continue the series on the building strong families and childhood development. Okay, God bless. See you all next week, same time, same place. God bless.
Thank you very much, Dr. Claudius Davis. And like I would tell folks, it's always a pleasure to have you here on each and every Wednesday, and a very much needed and interesting topic, the family and childhood development. God's willing, do join Dr. Davis next Wednesday right here on BFM from 9 until 10 as he continues to build the foundation on this wonderful topic here on BFM. Thank you very much, Dr. Davis. We've got just about 4 minutes after 10 o'clock, and here's where I'm going to be bidding you goodbye for yet another Wednesday here on WeFM. Certainly a pleasure being here, being able to musically entertain you, and also lend technical assistance to our interactive program. God's willing to join me on Sunday when I'll be in for your Sunday Classics program. Until then,